And we'll go through it one time with it on the screen, but then we're going to take away the screen, and we're going to try and do it without the screen, because memorization is pretty easy if you always have a cheat sheet, right, behind you. So now I'm going to keep a cheat sheet up here, just in case somebody's got to lead the circus, right? But I'm going to try to go without it, at least for the first verse, the 6th verse. Verse 7 I'm still working on, but let's say this together, okay? Exodus 34, 6 and 7. Okay, now, together, right? Right. Exodus 34, 6 and 7. The Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness, keeping steadfast love for thousands, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, but who will know my... Thank you. Visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children, and the children's children to the 3rd and 4th generation. Okay. And I get mixed up on but who will by no means clear the guilty, as you heard. All right, so now let's take away the net. And let's go, let's do verse 6. And we'll skip verse 7 as far as repeating. Let's try to get verse 6 down. So, okay, it's gone. All right, Exodus 34, 6 and 7. The Lord, a God merciful and gracious, slow to anger, and abounding in steadfast love and faithfulness. Very good. All right, so we've been going through the different attributes. This week, faithfulness. That means trustworthy, reliable, stable, okay? So when we call upon the Lord according to his character, according to his faithfulness, as God has been in the past, so will he be in the future. I believe the theological term is aseity. It's his unchangingness. He is faithful. We can rely upon him to act according to his character. And so he is faithful, or another word, trustworthy. All right, with that, we'll turn it over to Pastor Tad.
This week, we'll, as we're in our missions month, I thought about a number of different things that we could do for Sunday school. But we'll go with something I just called Missions 101, and kind of an explanation or an explanation of modern day missions and how that works and facilitated. So it's going to be more of just a practical Sunday school class. We're not going to go through a passage or anything like that, but we're just going to kind of look at this. If you have that handout that on the way in on that table, there's a handout. Anybody need one? If so, some of the boys can go and grab one. Anybody need one? Guys, you want to go grab some and send them to, keep your hand up if you need one, and those guys will find them. All right, if you have that paper, that has all of our missionaries on it, and it actually has on the one side, it has how to pray for our missionaries. On the other side, it has our missionaries. And one thing I included to kind of just give a reference is their mission board. And when you look at our missionaries and you see where they serve or the different things that people that we support, you see their mission boards, and you may think, what is a mission board? What does it do? How does somebody become a missionary? And what goes on? And you may look at it and you think, well, in Acts, I mean, they just sent Paul out. I mean, in the Gospels, Jesus sends out his disciples and calls them or sends them out to be people that proclaim the gospel. The word missionary isn't actually a term that we would find in the Bible. It's a term that you're going to open your Bible and see. If you go to the back, those maps that say Paul's third missionary journey, first, second, third missionary journey. It's not a word that you're going to see necessarily in the text. Now some, like the Amplified Bible or other Bibles, may insert it, but that's not a word that we actually translate from the Greek. The word missionary actually comes from the Latin, and it comes from a word that they translated from Latin, the idea of the act of sending or sending out a missionary, and it was missiomen or mission. My Latin is no good, so just, if you know Latin, I'm sorry that I don't. But the idea behind that word in Latin was to send somebody out, to go, to the act of sending somebody. And so the idea of missionary is this idea of being sent, somebody that's going out from a people group. And so missionaries are not an unbiblical idea. It's just a term that we use in English that you're probably not going to find in the New Testament, but you'll see the idea of an apostle or even the idea of a messenger, and this is the idea of a missionary, a sent one. And it comes from the Greek translation of the word apostle, which would be a sending. So sometimes we hear this argument. People will say, be a missionary every day. And I think that's a great saying in one sense, that people are saying, what they're really saying is be evangelistic every day. Try and share the gospel every day. Try to be a disciple of Christ. And so I think one of the things that we do is we kind of confuse terms. And so we put the idea of like a disciple, which is somebody that's going to be a follower of Christ, that makes more followers of Christ. We confuse the term disciple and the term missionary. So when we say be a missionary every day, that's not necessarily a wrong idea, but we sometimes lose the idea of what is a disciple. And if I'm going to be a disciple of Christ every day, that's somebody that's going to be a follower of Christ that makes more followers of Christ. And so if I'm a disciple every day, I'm doing the work that we would be saying when we say be a missionary every day. But I think the term missionary should be used specifically for people that we send out from our church to go plant other churches. And specifically, or most often, the term missionary probably should be reserved for those that go probably to different people groups or even beyond their borders. Now, we can have North American missions. We sometimes will say that. A missionary can be in North American missions and they're a North American church planter. And oftentimes we just shorten it and say they're a church planter in the United States. And so the term missionary is very helpful to reserve for those people that we send out from our church, and often they're going to cross cultural barriers and often geographical barriers as into another country. Now, I've had arguments with people about should we say, are you a missionary every day? Somebody was writing a book saying, they're writing a book and they wanted to say, be a missionary every day, and they were going to give it to everybody in their church. And I said, when we call everybody a missionary, we start to lose the effect of what it means for these people that you have in front of you that are sent out. So I encourage them to use the idea of a disciple or a follower of Christ or something along those lines. And we had a good, it wasn't like a big argument. It was just a healthy theological conversation. And so I think when we use the term missions and missionary, it helps us understand somebody that's going or being sent from us. Jesus said in Luke 9:23, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, follow me. And Jesus tells his followers to be on mission or following Jesus and to be doing his work. So a person that's on mission or a disciple of Christ is somebody that's following him, but a missionary is somebody that we usually send. And if we just Googled the term and the Oxford Dictionary comes up, a missionary is a person that is sent on a religious mission, especially one sent to promote Christianity in a foreign country. And so the Oxford Dictionary defines it as that, and we may say, well, as church people, we don't want the Oxford Dictionary to define it, but that's just how the word is commonly used. And I think that's helpful for us, even as a church, to say, support our missionaries. Well, the missionaries that we support, or pray for our missionaries, those are the people that we've sent out from us. Now, if you wanted to become a missionary, what would you do? Some people, when we talk about missions, will actually look at missions and just say, how do I become a missionary? Well, I'm just going to go for my church like this Sunday morning, and I'm going to start proclaiming the gospel. And I'm going to share it with my coworkers and my friends, and you're going to be doing the work of Christ. You're going to be doing the work of a disciple. But a missionary, as we say, is a little bit different. And so I think that when I say, how does somebody become a missionary, this is the idea of how somebody would become a missionary in our modern day. And this isn't because it's unbiblical or changed from biblical times or different from Paul, but I think it actually follows what we do, what they did, and what we should do now. To become a missionary, first you need to be a Christian, and that's almost self-explanatory. But if somebody's not a Christian and they're trying to be sent from our church to proclaim the gospel, that just doesn't make sense. So you need to be a Christian. You need to be involved in your local church. If you're if local churches are meant to plant other local churches, then you should be involved in the work of the ministry in your church, wherever it is. And if you're here today, I'm preaching to the choir, but you should be involved. A missionary should be somebody that is active where they're at. If you aren't active here, or somebody came to us and said, hey, Pastor, we want to go to this field and be a missionary, but they never serve, they never attend, they never show up, my first question is, why would you go somewhere else and actually serve the Lord when you're not serving the Lord here? Right? So that would be kind of the first step. If you're not serving locally, why would you serve anywhere abroad? If you want to be a missionary, you should probably be a growing and mature Christian. Somebody that's growing, and we would say this person is a follower of Christ, and we see discipleship happening in their life, and they're actually discipling others. They should also probably be confirmed, not probably, they need to be, biblically speaking, confirmed by your church and elders. So you would speak to your pastor, you would speak to spiritual leaders in your life, you would speak to them, and most of the time, for sure for me, if somebody talked to me, I'd encourage them to get some kind of biblical training. It could be locally by a pastor, and it could be training like that. It could be in a Bible institute, but I went to seminary, and I would highly encourage somebody that was becoming a missionary to go to Bible college and probably seminary. My thought on that is always, if people that you train are probably not going to go beyond the training of the pastor. So if your biblical knowledge of the Bible as a pastor or a missionary is very low and shallow, the people that you train probably will not go beyond that unless they have somebody else or something close by to be able to be trained. And so I always encourage somebody to get the most biblical training that they can before they go to the field. But then a question that I would ask and say this is critical, and I would encourage you as our people to think this whenever we have a missionary come to Faith Baptist Church. So if somebody comes to Faith Baptist Church and says, I'm looking to raise support, think about this in your mind. Would our church consider this person to be a pastor or elder? Would our church consider this person to be a pastor or an elder? And if you look at them and say, I don't think they're qualified to be a pastor, I don't think they're qualified to lead in a church here in the States, why would we send them overseas to do the same thing? And so those are questions that we need to think through. And you may say, well, there's exceptions. They're going to go overseas and they're going to work in a hospital, or they're going to work in a school and teach. And I would say, okay, I understand that. But if somebody's going overseas to plant a church, and if we would say they can't be a pastor or they're not qualified to be an elder here, I would say we probably shouldn't send them overseas. You may say, well, I'm not sure about that, or I disagree, but I would push back on that and say the people that we see in the New Testament as people being sent, those are people that were elders and leaders in the church. The next thing, on number 5, it says, be burdened and called. Now, this is something that we could take a whole Sunday school lesson or a whole month probably talking about burdens and callings and different things in the New Testament. And I'll just kind of summarize it quickly. You probably have a burden for certain places. Clifton, for instance, has gone to Germany with us to do baseball camp. My dad has, and so they would have probably a burden specifically for Germany more than maybe other places. Now, that's not because they don't care for other places, but they know people there. There's a specific burden. John and Marilyn, right, you were in Zambia, and so they probably have a burden for Zambia more than they have in other places. Now, a calling is going to be a little bit more as far as I believe God is asking me to specifically go to those people and plant a church or share the gospel with them and do that for my life or do that for a period of time. Now, we could get into that, but I would say if somebody doesn't care and doesn't have a burden or a calling or a love for those people, it's tough for them to go minister to people that you hate and or that you don't like. And so that's something that you probably have to work through. But I put that in there, and if you just if you put a little asterisk by it, you could put more to be said later, or there's lots that could be said on this, on a burden and calling. But if somebody doesn't have a love for the people or a care for them, well, that's the red flags that go up. But if you see that somebody genuinely loves them, cares for them, and really sees that God has put on their heart to go somewhere, then that's very indicative of a calling. Be preparing. Work where you are to serve and see what God would have you do. Some people are very gifted in preaching and teaching. Some are very gifted in possibly different other works that are going to aid in a ministry growing in certain ways. And you start to learn those, but you learn those in your local church. One of the ways you can also prepare is going on trips, like short-term trips. When we took a trip to Germany, maybe we'll be able to do that again sometime with travel restrictions and things changing up, Lord willing. One of the things that you could do is say, you know what, I don't want to take a vacation necessarily. You're going to take some of your vacation time, but I'm going to take some of my finances and my life, my week of my life, and go visit one of our missionaries. And I'm going to go, and I'm not going to go to be a burden for them and be like, hey, let me have a vacation and show me the country. But you go and you say, I'm going to be a blessing. I'm going to serve. I'm going to do whatever I can. And probably call in advance and make sure that it's going to be something that would be actually helpful for them. But you could do a lot of things like that. You may go on a survey trip and see, but that's one of the ways that you prepare. If you're going to a place also that you don't know the language, obviously working on the language is something that you would do, and so you do that. And then be supported. Not just financially, which we would obviously realize we need, but by a good support team of prayer warriors. And I would say, in some sense, who's going to be the people that are overseeing you, which is going to be your local church, but then are there other people like in a mission board or whatever? So you raise support, but it's not just financial support. There's going to be a lot of other support that you're going to need to get to the mission field. When we went to Taiwan for a couple years, I needed somebody to help show me how to get a visa, where to apply, what to do. When I land at the airport, what's going to happen? And the mission board helps with that. Some of our people in the States help with that. Missionaries overseas help with that. But there's a lot of that's involved in going to another place and serving. And so you need to learn who's going to support you and how can you be supported. And then decide how you're going to be sent. Are you going to be sent by your church? Are you going to be sent solo by yourself? And I would say if you're just going by yourself, then you're probably just going for another career. A missionary is intrinsically tied to a church and supported by a church. A missionary without a church is just really like a rogue agent of the church. And missionaries need to be tied to the church. And then you're sent, you get on the plane, you go, and Lord willing, you do that for a long time. You serve. Learn the language, live with the people, serve them, show them Jesus, and you train others to show, be disciples. And so you see straight from Warren Wiersbe, all the be things. He didn't write all those, but he has a bunch of commentaries called Be whatever. So that's how would you become a missionary? That's something that we would look at. Any thoughts or questions? All right. Well, I'll give Lord willing a chance, and this is like the fire hose of, whatever, but at the end we'll give some questions if possible. What is a mission board, though? What is a mission board? When we look at that paper that I gave you, almost every one of those missionaries had a mission board. Some of them say Baptist Mid-Missions. Some of them say Baptist World Missions. Some of them, one of them is Open Door Baptist Mission, and there's numerous of them. Lots and lots of mission boards. The local church is God's appointed center for missionary work. Missionaries are sent and supported by the local church. It's on the local church upon which who they report to when they return. So a local church sends a missionary, supports a missionary, and helps a missionary go. A local church is the one that really has the authority over that missionary because they're being sent out as somebody from that church. But if you look at our church and you look at most churches across the United States, as far as a small Baptist church like ours or other churches of our size, it's real tough for us to be able to facilitate everything that's needed for somebody to go overseas for years. If Emerson came and said, I want to be a missionary, and we sent him out, and Emerson said to whatever country, and he said, can you guys help me do all the finances? And if we said he's going to go to, let's say, Argentina, he says, help me take care of all the finances. Would you help me do all the processing for the visas? Would you help me? Some places will need an organization actually in Argentina to invite you. That was what was happening in Taiwan. We got invited by an organization that had been established by other missionaries in Taiwan. They were able to invite us. Well, us as a local church, we would have a real tough time figuring all that out. I wouldn't be able to do that. And I'd say, you know what? I'm going to appoint you to a mission board. A mission board is going to be able to help you learn all those things. Mission boards are groups of people who really oversee and aid the activities of a missionary on the mission field. A mission board can be as simple as a small church and a group of people that help oversee that, but oftentimes it's going to be a much larger group. I know of a church, in fact, on the mission list I gave you, I think there's one, Hector Garcia, and it says Grace Baptist Mission, I believe it says, right? I don't have that paper with me. But that's Grace Baptist Mission, right? So Hector is part of Grace Baptist Mission. Grace Baptist Mission is part of the church that we were at when I was in seminary, so the Inner City Baptist Church. That church is a large church, really sound financially, theologically. They have a Christian school and a seminary. They have, God's richly blessed them, probably more than most churches, and they're able to have a mission board for a few missionaries. But they're very select in those. They're kids or people that go through the seminary there, that were part of the church, that's a tight connection. And they're able to facilitate that. But not many churches are able to do that. So they help Hector in that, and they've got the ability to do that. If Hector asked us to do that, I'd say go find a mission board. And it's just tough for a small church to do that. So a mission board is one that helps people to do that. So it could be in a church. It could be a large group of people. If you look on there, it says, I think the Bauchams, the Clarks, and the one others, maybe I'm missing one or two, but they're from Baptist Mid-Missions. Baptist Mid-Missions, that's who we went to when we were in Taiwan. And that was in Cleveland, Ohio. And we went to their area, we went to their building. They have a big area. They have lots of people there that are helping. Some are helping people get the finances straight. So when churches send money in, it goes to this board, and they help facilitate that. Baptist Mid was huge. I mean, they have a ton of missionaries, and they were able to really help people when we went to the field. We had lots of questions for them, and they had tons of answers. And so that was really helpful. But they were a pretty big organization, and a lot of churches, even us, we send money to them, and we trust them to send it to our missionaries who we support. So we support a missionary. They're part of that board. Our money goes to Baptist Mid in their account, and then it's sent to their account. And sometimes it stays in that account here in the States for a long time. Sometimes it goes directly. It just depends on the needs of the missionaries. Okay? So that's a mission board. Is it unbiblical? I would say I don't think that's an unbiblical thing. I think it's just a helpful thing that is a useful tool in our day that I think believe is very worthy of us to help out. What do missionary boards do, or what do mission boards do? Well, they recommend applicants to local churches. Sometimes we don't, obviously, we don't always monthly or yearly have somebody from our church going out, so we have missionaries in. We sometimes will have them in for missions conference. The McCrocklins were here a couple weeks ago. They're going to Germany. We have certain ones in. A mission board will sometimes say, hey, you support our missionary here. Would you consider having a missionary in to present their ministry to this place? And so they recommend missionaries to churches. So I think that's a helpful thing that mission boards do. They also provide training for deputation and missionary service. Now, if you're going to go out in an independent church like ours, how do you raise support to be a missionary? If you think about it, I don't know if you've been to other foreign countries. Sometimes we think that the United States or wherever we live, since we're paying the bills, we feel like where we live may be the most expensive place in the world, or our country or whatever. But I would say when we visited Singapore was ridiculously expensive. Taiwan, downtown, apartments were crazy high. There's no, and if I went there with my family in Taiwan, when we lived there, we lived in a 22-story apartment building. We had a beautiful window that looked over the road, and I was terrified because I'm scared of heights, and because we were on the 19th floor. And eventually I started to enjoy that, but it's totally different. And just our small little apartment was costly, and imagine one for our family now would be a high expense. And if we went to other places, sometimes it's very expensive. So how much should a missionary raise to go? Well, some of them are raising $50,000, $60,000, and I know of some that have raised over $100,000 because that's just simply how much it costs to live in that country, whether you're a local or not. Now, you may go to another country that it's much cheaper, but they train and they help with the deputation. And they'll say, how does a missionary actually raise support from a church? Well, they train you to do that. They also provide appointees with church contacts. They also manage the finances of the missionary while on the field. The missionary can request funds to be transferred. Certain things happen. One of the things that most mission boards do now is they actually take about $200, some of them are less, but what I've seen is $200 to $500 from a missionary's support to help finance their costs. So a missionary that is supported, let's say $4,000 a month. They need $4,000 a month to go to their field. Well, $400 or $500 or $200 is going to go from that support directly to the mission board, so the mission board can help support that missionary and do those things. That pays for the missionary to basically have their finances worked on, all the different things that are done, the taxes are done, and so those things, and taxes when you're overseas can be particularly interesting. We had to file for taxes when we were in Taiwan, so when you're filing taxes in Taiwan and in the United States, and not knowing all this when we were like, 25 years old, it's really nice to have somebody else to help you do that because you're clueless at that time. So they help you plan for retirement. One of the things that we've seen even in the recently, missionaries that are retiring, some of them opted out of Social Security. They get to a point where they had no retirement plan and they're 80-something years old, and they're still trying to collect support because they had no retirement plan. And so it's tough because they may say, I can't go anywhere, I can't do anything, but I still need support because that's my only income. And so one of the things that mission boards have done is help missionaries think through this reasonably to a point where it's like, at a certain point, you're going to need to retire and you're going to need to have funds that are going to support you in retirement. And so mission boards have done a great job of helping missionaries become very good stewards of that. And so that's been a helpful thing. Another thing that they do is provide accountability and spiritual support. If you look at our missionary list, you see that? Somebody want to count how many we have on there? 12 on there, and Camp Loma Vita, and I didn't put Josh Green on there. So Josh, if you're watching, I'm sorry. And if you don't know about that, that's okay. But you can write in Josh Green, and he's going to be trained to be church planting. And so we've supported him for this year. If you would look and see those 13, I can go visit Camp Loma de Vida this year. Josh is in Oklahoma. I might be able to, or somebody could possibly go visit Oklahoma, and maybe we could go visit the Huckles in Philadelphia. There's a couple others that are in the States that we might be able to go visit, but we're starting to get expensive, right? And then you start to think about all the missionaries that we have overseas. How do we support them? Or how do we keep them accountable? How do we check up on them? How do we gauge their spiritual life? Well, it's tough. It's tough for a pastor to do individually or a church to do. It's tough for us to do. And so one of the things that a mission board helps with is helps them keep accountable and also helps them with their spiritual support. It's tough for a missionary to call home to a pastor sometimes and be like, you know what, I'm really struggling and I am really down and sad, and when they call a pastor, the pastor's like, well, maybe we need to drop their support. Not all pastors are like that, and I don't think we would be like that. We would be thinking, how can we help them? But it's sometimes helpful for them to be able to call a mission board and say, hey, how can I get through this time that's a really tough time? Well, the mission board is often made up of people that served there for many years, and they're back then supporting them at home. So they can help work through that. Also, they help with country access, emergency exits. You probably know of missionaries that have had medical emergencies that pop up. Well, how do they get back to the States? If you're on your own, or if you're a church and somebody called us and said, hey, Pastor Harris, I've got a medical emergency. Can you get me out of the country of Argentina or Brazil or whatever? We would be like, call 911, man. I don't know. I mean, because we wouldn't know what to do. But a mission board has those facilities and those abilities. Sometimes it's through their insurance, sometimes it's through other arrangements, sometimes it's through other connections. Okay. All right. One of the things that the last thing I wanted to do is give a little bit of an explanation of the difference between the SBC cooperative program and the independent Baptist missions and the ideas there. Independent mission boards, and that's probably super small, but independent mission boards send the missionaries to many churches. They raise so missionaries, the ones that we support, almost all of them are through independent mission boards. So they would go to individual church after church after church, and I would say 50 would be a low number that they probably go to, possibly upwards of hundreds or more. So often over 1, 2, 3 years of deputation, they go to different churches. Churches will decide on whether they support them, and the missionary will say, send my money to this, or send the money that you're going to support me, send it to this board, so let's say Baptist Mid-Missions, and eventually they raise support, and that's why we say, what percentage are you at in your support raising? And so for an independent missionary, it may say, I'm at 5%, I'm at 10%, I'm at 90%. And a mission board is then sent overseas by the church, and the board helps facilitate that. In the SBC cooperative program, which is, and the reason I bring this up is not to just say, there's just a lot of questions that often come up between this, because a lot of people that we have come here have either been part of an SBC church, or they're an independent and they don't understand sometimes what goes on. So the cooperative program for the SBC, I think there's a picture of it up there. Church members will give to their local church. The church gives a portion in an SBC church. They give it to their state, a portion of their offerings, maybe 2%, 5%, whatever they choose. It may just be a set amount, like $500 a year. An SBC church gives to to their state convention. So in Texas, there's a couple different state conventions, the Texas Baptist and the Southern Baptist of Texas Convention. So there's a couple of them, one more conservative, one not so much. And so there's money that's given to one of those conventions. That convention will take a percentage and use some of it for in-state missions. So there's certain church planters here in-state that the SBC of Texas, Southern Baptist Convention of Texas, will support. There's also some that will be sent, some money that will be sent nationally to the cooperative program, to the SBC cooperative program, and they support missionaries through the IMB, which is International Mission Board, also through NAM, North American Mission Board, and they send money to people that way. And they also support seminaries like Southern Seminary or Southwestern. And so there's different seminaries that they support, disaster relief programs and different things. So the SBC cooperative program, money gets sent by a percentage from the state convention to the SBC cooperative program, and then that's sent out to different agencies or places. If you were going to become a missionary through an independent mission board, you'd go through your church, and then you'd go through those different steps. You'd find a mission board, and you would start raising support. If you went through an SBC church, you would go to your church. They would recommend you, and you would go to the IMB, so the International Mission Board, and they have a huge process. It's actually pretty robust training program, and pretty. They evaluate their missionaries pretty detailed in quite a few weeks of evaluation. And once you do that, the IMB will support you either fully through the cooperative program, or they'll do a percentage. Some will be part-time, or that will raise some support through different churches. So sometimes we will think, well, if you're an SBC missionary, you just had everything raised and given to you, and that's not necessarily the case in every situation. So which one is better? Which one is the right model? Well, it probably depends on which church you're in, because that's what you're going to feel is correct. We would say we like the independent model, but I would also myself be very careful to criticize other models, because is one more biblical than the others? Well, we can make a case for that. But I would also say both are doing the work of the ministry by sending people abroad and to different places. And so could we talk about concerns about independent mission boards and concerns about the SBC mission boards? Certainly. I have lists of them here, and we're not going to get to that, and you probably don't need to worry about them but there's concerns that we would have with, so there's pros and cons. Any questions, one or two?
I think it's important to note that each of these boards, including the SBC, they all have doctrinal statements.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we found in Taiwan is it was fascinating. We worked with Baptist Mid, and so I met missionaries from Baptist Mid there, worked with them closely. I met missionaries from Macedonia Baptist Mission, and that we worked with them. They were great people, but they're a very, very strong King James only board, and I would say actually poorly written in their doctrinal statement, but it was so strong that I was nervous about this, but when we interacted with them, there was no problems. One of the reasons is because when you're in Taiwan, you're using a Chinese Bible, and it really, King James is kind of irrelevant there. So, it's those arguments kind of just ceased, and it's like, well, there's no big deal. And when they'd come back to the States, those arguments would start up again, which is one of those concerns and the foolishness of the way we do things. But we interacted with them tremendously. And I also interacted with Southern Baptist missionaries that were there in Taiwan. And many of them I would get along with extremely well. And we could have probably cooperated in lots of things. But sometimes when we have the independent boards, we're very independent-minded, and we don't want to cooperate and work together. And so that's good and bad. Any other questions? We're at time to finish. Yes. Yeah. Yes, they're here, and I believe they're doing well from their last report. And but I mean, they've got all their struggles that they're going through. But we'll finish with that, and you go greet everybody and have a great 20-minute break between service.